What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rooted in Movement, the podcast. This is going to be part number 2 of my mini series here on the mind-body connection. And my intention today behind this particular part of the mind-body connection mini series is to provide you all with some real-world actionable steps, so some practices that you can take and put in your toolbox to help to develop your mind-body connection. Before we get into my top 3 tips for doing so, we have to go micro. So we have to go micro before we go macro, because I want you all to gain a little bit of a better understanding around why we're doing what we're doing, or why I am actually giving you these particular patterns or exercises or movements to do to improve your mind-body connection. So the way that we understand this, we need to start to think about what is actually happening chemically inside the body when the mind body or the mind muscles are actually connected. Okay. So when the mind body is connected, we see good movement. We talked about this during part 1. This is that seamless and effortless movement known as athleticism. So inside the body, this is actually visually appealing movement, and it's produced via this bioelectricity. Okay. So this bioelectricity underpins literally everything in our nervous system. Okay. This bioelectricity is an undercurrent that directs the chemical processes in the body. These processes are characterized by different things like neurotransmitters, which are really these chemical messengers sent into the synapses. Okay. The connections between like the nerve and the muscle, the nerve and other nerves, by an electrical charge, which is it's then used to communicate information about how to operate or actually move the body. And these neurotransmitters are impacted heavily by things like exercise and nutrition and mindset. And in varying levels of these different neurotransmitters will have a profound effect on our emotions, our perception of movement, our perception of pain, our memory, our alertness, our energy, and even our coordination, which we learned last time is all encompassing to build this thing that we know as athleticism. So we can think about this as kind of like a Wi-Fi network that's going on throughout your body. So physically, when we see somebody who has like chronic Achilles tendonitis or like patellar tendonitis, like knee pain, like jumper's knee, this is usually coming down to like a poor Wi-Fi connection. Okay, so a poor mind-body connection, and they get this paralysis by analysis when they're moving that we talked about before, where they're actually working way too hard. We're utilizing too much muscle and not allowing for efficient energy transfer throughout the body through this Wi-Fi network. And it's actually done primarily through our fascial system and the tendons. Okay, so the fascial system that actually holds all the joints and the muscles together. You can kind of think about it like the skin on a raw chicken breast, where you can kind of peel it up. That is what your fascia looks like, but it actually has a lot of different nerve endings that go throughout it, and also houses a lot of these, it's where a lot of these neurotransmitters are then being sent throughout. So they direct this efficient energy transfer. So like when we run and our foot hits the ground, we have to have this efficient energy transfer through the fascia into the tendons, like from the bottom of the foot. Plantar fasciitis, anybody? Like this is a main source of the problem down there. So we hit the ground with our foot, the energy from gravity and the ground reaction forces are sent up into plantar fascia, into the foot itself, controlled by the muscles through this idea of tensegrity, where it holds all the joints together, transferred efficiently up into the tendon of the Achilles, or the Achilles tendon, the gastroc and the soleus, the calf muscles there, and then up into the knee and eventually into the hip to create hip extension to propel us forward. If we don't get that good energy transfer, what ends up happening is the force is going to bleed somewhere, right? It's going to bleed out into somewhere in our knee. So we end up destroying our meniscus over time, or we put it all into the patellar tendon, and that's taken most of the brunt of the force because the Achilles tendon isn't doing its job, or the plantar fascia that's doing its job. And then we never really achieve hip extension. So we end up like waddling, and we call circumduction, or swinging our leg out when we run. And you can see this when you watch people run. And that's why we found ourselves so reliant on things like big cushiony shoes, is to help absorb this force. So without going down the whole foot rabbit hole again, a better mind-body connection, especially from the ground up with the feet, will help improve this Wi-Fi connection that we have. Another example of this is like a runner's high, right? So we go back to our neurotransmitters that we were talking about. This runner's high is produced by a neurotransmitter called endorphins. Okay, that is the runner's high itself, and it's released by the brain to protect or block against excessive pain or discomfort, which then allows you to run farther. Okay, so you see what we did there? two examples here of running, right? And I'm not even a runner. Imagine that. I sprint, but definitely not your endurance type by any means. So this bioelectricity that we were talking about earlier, it's energy. And we talked about this before, but like where your focus goes, your energy is going to flow. So when the mind is connected well with the body, we see high levels of three very important neurotransmitters released in the body. You have BDNF, VEGF, and FGF. So BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it's the protein that actually builds nerve cells and keeps them working really efficiently. VEGF is vascular endothelial growth factor, or fibroblast, and then also that last one, actually FGF, is fibroblast growth factor. And these both help with neurogenesis, which is really just growing bigger and more connected nerves, essentially. So together, all three of these really enhance this neuroplasticity concept, which is changing the brain, right? Or the ability to keep the ability to allow the brain to adapt, allow it to grow, and allow it to evolve with new movement patterns, which are then going to make us more coordinated, make us stronger, allow us to rehabilitate better through pain and injury, and just essentially become better human movers. So this bioelectrical energy flows through and around literally every single cell in our body, and it's flowing through what we call the extracellular matrix, which actually acts like the body's own personal Wi-Fi setup, like we talked about earlier, to transmit this information. So this means that everything in our body is in communication at all times. It never stops. The preferred language for this communication is going to be force. So while we're talking here, well, I'm talking to you, I'm having a conversation with you, I'm using the English language to communicate. That is the language of humans. The language of our body is this force concept, right? So applied force to bodily structures actually tells your cells how to adapt. And this changes via the process of what we call mechanotransduction, which is essentially just how the cells pass information on to each other, okay? And this is why like sitting in a chair all day long doesn't allow you to squat below 90 degrees of hip flexion like we talked about last time. Your cells literally have not adapted to the position that you want to go into. They have adapted to the position that you spend most of your time in, which is sitting in a chair at 90 degrees. Alternatively, though, consistently performing squats on a daily basis will give your cells permission to adapt, right? It'll give your cells permission to adapt to the pattern of a deep squat. So simply put, if you want to get better at any type of skill, like squatting deeper, you have to tell your cells how to adapt through movement and resistance training, which is like weights and then also with gravity. Like just literally learning how to control your joints through gravity will help send this information and tell your brain how to adapt your body. So this can also be related to the use it or lose it phenomenon. So yes. I know where everybody's mind went here. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. We were told this from very early age. But while that may not be true for us men, it does actually come down to a true scientific fact when it comes to movement with the body, because it's more of a neurological thing, right? So when we don't do something for a while, like exercise, our brain shuts down the neural networks that are actually used to create those movement patterns. So if you haven't squatted in a while, that's why your legs are going to look and feel like a baby giraffe. Learning how to walk for the first time, you're going to get the wobbles when you try to squat again, because it's really your brain trying to figure out how to coordinate that movement pattern again. I'm actually seeing this firsthand with a new puppy that we just got. She's going to be 12 weeks old here in a couple weeks, and she is literally like watching a baby giraffe learn how to walk, because her brain, her nervous system hasn't yet figured out that pattern. She hasn't had really enough reps in yet to use those long giraffe legs that she has efficiently. Okay, she's still breaking them in. The last piece of the puzzle here, though, is the breath. Okay, and the breath is the king of the brain, and the brain is the king of the body. It's one of my favorite lines of all time. Our breath controls the state of our nervous system. Okay, so many of us spend our days stressed out in really this fight or flight state, constantly running from a line that, well, honestly isn't real, right? This is a sympathetic state that is then going to alter our blood chemistry, our posture, and our movement patterns, making us feel more tense and tight, limiting our ranges of motion, and causing a stress response into areas like our neck and our low back. This is a common occurrence. I know you've all heard about it before. It's why neck and back pain are the highest prevalent pain presentations we see, because we're all running our freaking Ferrari engine on red forever. We never ever turn down the gear. We never put it into cruise, right? Into cruise control, right? We're just kind of redlining our cars all day long, every day of the week, every month, all year long, okay? Because in this sympathetic fight or flight state, our breaths are usually shallow and frequent, okay? We have conscious control over our breath. We can change that by slowing our breath down into these long exhales that actually allow us to enter the parasympathetic state, or the rest and digest, which is much, much more useful for things like improving our digestion, lowering our pain levels, and opening up our mobility for that matter, okay? So now that we got basic understanding of how kind of all this works with the Wi-Fi network inside of our body and the neurotransmitters that release chemical mediators like the endorphins that help us reduce our sensation of pain, and then all the way and down into our breath that we can change our nervous system with and start to shift the state of how we perceive things in our body, like tightness and pain and movement, and actually improve our digestion as well. So it is going to require practice. We're going to move into the 3 tips that I'm going to give you, but just be aware that if you just do this one time, it's not really going to change much. You might get some fleeting relief or a fleeting change in your body, but it does require practice. It requires more time given to these particular practices to start to develop the connection through movement, and also to create more progressive overload of these different movement patterns, and also the breath control to be able to change the brain, because the brain is an organ, but it's also like your biceps. So in order to help it grow, like through connections and efficiency, you actually need to train it daily. And this can be accomplished through different things like breath work, visualization, and a daily challenging movement practice that actually pushes you outside your comfort zone. So these are going to be our 3 tips. So the first one is going to be breath work and visualization. This is actually the very first thing that I like to do every single morning for about an hour, is to go through breath work and a meditation practice that usually involves some type of journaling about what I'm feeling inside my body in that particular moment or that particular morning. Okay, so meditation can be actually pretty difficult for people to grasp, which is why I like to use my breath as a way to focus my mind. Okay, so what I do is I set a time for an allotted period of time, like let's just say 10 to 15, maybe 20 minutes. And I like to start my mornings with 5 minutes to begin. That's kind of how I started with this, is just keep the goal short in the beginning, especially if you don't have a lot of practice with it. You start by setting that timer, sitting comfortably on the floor, maybe lying flat on your back with your knees bent, whatever feels most comfortable for you. And within that 5 minutes, I use a 4-7-8 breath technique. So I inhale for 4 seconds, hold at the top for 7 seconds, and then exhale slowly through the mouth, like blowing through a straw, for 8 seconds. And this long, slow exhale is what's going to put you into more of that parasympathetic state. It's going to help quiet your mind because you're giving yourself something to focus on, and help clear your mind to help you feel into your body more. So I want you to imagine the air kind of moving down the front of your body with the inhale all the way down to your pelvic bowl. Hold and feel that air pressing into your low belly. And as you exhale, imagine the air moving up your spine and out the crown of your head. So it's very circular in nature. Okay. You could also focus on moving the air into areas that may feel tight or may feel limited. A lot of times with my current movement practice of trying to achieve the middle splits and forward backward splits, my hips will often get a little bit cranky, right? So I will purposely breathe into those areas of my body intentionally. So you can set an intention and roll there if you want to. And if you are about to go to the gym or practice your favorite sport, you can imagine yourself moving the barbell or scoring the game-winning goal during this breath practice like this, or hitting dingers. So if you're a baseball player like I am, you imagine yourself hitting a home run. So you do this visualization practice during your breath work. So you're setting an intention and you're calling an intention during the breath work to help improve your movement patterns and really set the stage for the task or the goal that you want to complete next. Okay. The second one, this is our second tip here of improving the mind-body connection, is to protect, correct, and develop your feet. Okay. And the reason why we're bringing this one up is, without going deep down the rabbit hole of why the foot is so important, you can go back to my previous podcast on the foot masterclass to listen about that. But it comes down to sensation. Okay, so your feet have the highest amount of mechanoreceptors found anywhere in the body. They help detect a lot of this nutritious information that we need to move well. So you need to protect your feet by ditching your overly cushioned and rigid shoes that are compressing your toes and shutting down your foot musculature and truly limiting the sensory input. This will also help correct your feet by walking barefoot on as many different types of surfaces possible, like tile, carpet, hardwood, rubber. They all provide different sensory nutrients to your brain and into your nervous system. And you're going to develop your feet by training barefoot and strengthening up the communication between your feet and the rest of your body. Okay, because your feet literally will dictate how the rest of your body moves with every single step by transmitting these different ground reaction forces, or think about it like energy, through your kinetic chain. So training barefoot and taking them through as many different movement patterns as possible will help improve your movement literacy and develop that connection piece between the feet and your trunk and your core and literally the rest of your body, but most importantly, your brain, which actually dictates your movement. And the last piece of the puzzle here, this last tip that I'm going to have for you, is to work in. So many of you may be familiar with the term working out, right? This is where your heart rate elevates, breathing increases, and you get really sweaty. Maybe you just got done watching Cops or building bunk beds. Maybe that was the reason why you're all sweaty. But I want you to shift your perspective to a different style of training. Now, if you didn't get that movie quote, "We're no longer friends," maybe you can. If you did get it, please let me know, and then we'll become even better friends now. But what I want you to do is actually shift your perspective to a different style of training that I like to call working in, where the number of reps, the load of the weight in the barbell, or the range of motion that you're going into is actually dictated by your breath. So have you ever actually thought about how well you can breathe in certain postures and positions? Or do you hold your breath the entire time? Holding your breath the entire time is just like activating that fight or flight response, okay? Working in, on the other hand, allows you to focus on your breath and bring attention to how you are moving. You can slow down and focus on your movement. This creates a lot of time under tension physiologically, further developing the connection between your mind and your body. Okay? You can try and perform a body weight squat as slow as humanly possible and actively pull yourself down into your deepest position. And I want you to feel how your bare feet are interacting with the ground. Where do you feel pressure in your feet? How are your knees and hips moving? Do you feel any tension points or tight spots that could potentially be limiting factors that are predisposing you to pain and injury? You can visualize the movement pattern you want to create and create it. And the best part is you can breathe into these patterns as well. So this is where we can start to combine a couple of these tips here, where I like to coordinate the breath with the movement pattern. So for a squat, like an example like we just gave, I will inhale on the way down, smooth and controlled, then exhale on the way up. So the inhale is associated with this yielding strategy or expansion on the way down, and then exhaling on the way up, compressing yourself, using the energy that you just stored in your body through that nice, smooth movement on the way down and utilizing it to stand up in an efficient way. So utilizing that Wi-Fi network inside the body. We could also take the squat as an example. And when you get into the bottom position, I want you to try and take a full deep breath in and out down there. If you can't, you don't truly own that position. So what we're looking for here is if you could take like 90% of your total tidal volume, which is, you don't really need to know, but can you almost take a full breath? That's how you know you actually own that movement pattern. If you can't, that's something we need to work on, okay? So I hope that these tips are useful for you, and once you get out there and practice them and really start to make them a part of your routine. So put it on your schedule, because if you don't put it onto your schedule, it's going to be like me, it doesn't get done. Okay, so the mornings are for me the best time to accomplish this because I get to knock it out right away. But if you're an afternoon, evening type of a person, go ahead and throw it in there, whatever makes it most efficient for you and sets you up for success instead of failure. So I really hope you enjoyed these tips. I really hope that you start practicing them today and start really feeling the benefits. I know you're going to love the way that you feel with your breath and how efficient your movement patterns are. And once you start to develop more of this mind-body connection, you're going to be amazed at how well it improves your performance, not only in the gym, on the field, but also in life. So once again, remember that your mind-body connection is rooted in movement, and I will see you all next time. I am Thor.